It's time. Let's get started. This is the NETMOD meeting for IETF 125. I'm Kent Watson. My co-chair Lou Berger is online. You want to say hi, Lou? And our secretary James Cumming is next to me at the table. This is the introductory chair slides. First, so we're midweek now. You're probably by now familiar with the note well, but just be aware that we do conduct ourselves in a professional manner, and if there's any concerns with how the meeting was officiated, there's rules and procedures for how that can be addressed. And similarly, be aware of the fact that contributions made during the meeting are considered to be IETF contributions. There's a lot more to this slide, and it's incumbent upon everyone to be familiar with it, and as we have this meeting. So in a little bit more detail, the IETF conduct guidelines, the ISG has asked all chairs to remind their working groups of the need for appropriate behavior. This is described in more detail in BCP 54, but in summary, participants extend respect and courtesy to the colleagues at all times. Participants have impersonal discussions. Participants devise solutions for the global internet that meet the needs of diverse technical and operational environments, and individuals are prepared to contribute to the ongoing work of the group. Some meeting tips. For in-person participants, those that are in the room currently, please be sure to sign into Data Tracker. Hanging from the microphones and also outside the room, there's a QR code that you can scan that will take you directly there. Do log in though, it's the only way for joining the mic queue, as well as for participating in a show of hand polls. If you do join the mic queue, be sure to remove yourself from the mic queue when you've completed making your comment. It is possible for the chairs to do it, but it's just one less thing we have to worry about doing during the meeting. For the remote participants, the guidelines are similar, but again, be sure to log in to Data Tracker. I guess you must be if you're listening to this audio currently. But be sure to that your audio and video are off unless you're actually presenting during the session, or having a comment, like you raised your hand, you're asking a question. Then you can turn on your microphone and video. Headsets are strongly recommended. It's very common, unfortunately, that the audio quality doesn't come through, and it's almost, many times it's, for me at least, it seems to be Bluetooth related issues, battery going bad, something like that. So just be mindful. Audio quality is incredibly important for remote participants. As mentioned before, we are using Meet Echo for queue control. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a hand join queue. So that's the button to press. We'll put your name in the queue, which will show on the screen. And when your name's up, please come to the microphone and ask your question. Also, online we have chat and Jabber available for use. And there used to be blue sheets, but now that's automatically done through your Data Tracker login. And so it's not unnecessary at this point to submit or sign a blue sheet. For note taking, please everyone help us take notes. The link has been posted to the chat window. It opens up the HedgeDoc page. The HedgeDoc page is organized in copy paste of the agenda. So each presentation will have its own place for notes to be taken. And as much as possible, being able to take the notes during the meeting is helpful. Definitely, if you make your own comment, be sure that your comment has been captured correctly. The agenda and slides are online, and as you can see the URL there, and also using the Meet Echo tool, you can jump to them. And of course, the Data Tracker for the NETMOD working group. Document updates. So very nicely, we've had a number of recently published RFCs. This is great, what we're here to do. RFC 9899, extensions to the Yang data model for access control list. 9911, common Yang data types, and 9922, common Yang data model for scheduling. So how about a show of hands, a clap of hands for that? Excellent. In the editor queue, there are a number of documents as well. We have the the schedule Yang document, and also the 8407 biz and system config documents. Uh, they're submitted to the ISG, but not yet in RC editor queue, include the module versioning and VLAN and interface extension Yang documents. So a lot of documents have been moved into the ISG queue or outside of the working group, and the ISG is busy working on them. I don't know, Mahesh, did you want to say anything about any of these documents? Okay, Mahesh is coming to the microphone.
All right. I'm glad you brought it up. I just had the question back to the working group. I believe, so let's start with module versioning. So I wanted to send the cluster of the 3 documents, maybe now 4, but let's assume it's just the 3 that Semver, versioning, and file name is what we want to send together. I believe we are waiting on some directorate comments on the file name. And I think I put that comment, and I'm hoping that the author, in this case, would address them so then I can send them together for publication.
And I see Per has joined the queue. I think he's going to respond to that.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Super. The IANA considerations have been updated for module file name, and there are some other directed comments, and I have waited to get them all in one go. And we're discussing it in the Yang versioning team as well, how to proceed. One comment was to don't use the sharp sign, but instead use something else, and we're discussing how to proceed.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'm not sure if there's anything else waiting on the other 2. I can go and check. I think maybe Semver, I need to check whether that had any pending comments. So moving to sub-interface VLAN, I did have a chat with Scott to figure out, I think there's one change that was requested a long time ago, and that's holding up its corresponding document. So I'm just waiting for that update before I can push those 2 documents for publication. So I know interface extension is on hold, I think waiting for sub-interface, or the other way around. I don't remember.
All right, thank you,
I think,
Mahesh.
is Scott in the room? I think Scott's in the room.
Oh,
Do we want him?
Two rows behind Mahesh.
Yeah, so do you want to give us an update of when you plan to do that update?
I plan to do that update once I can get a hold of Rob Wilton and have a conversation. That's where we are.
I see Joe.
I think we have a few minutes left at the end of this meeting. Maybe we'll use it for that discussion because Rob will be here also.
Well, I see Rob's online, but Joe Clark, you're in queue.
Yeah, Joe Clark on Semver. Tony Lee gave a review. There will be some updates, and I need to reply to him. There was also, as you know, a typo in the INA considerations in Semver. So we do have some changes in GitHub, and now that the window is reopened, we'll publish them.
Okay, excellent. And I see that Rob has replied on chat window. Okay, so moving ahead to the next slide. Document updates. So working group drafts that are on the agenda include the versioning requirements and schema comparison and Yang packages documents. Not on the agenda are the Yang versioning requirements, Yang any data validation, Yang version selection, and Yang solutions. But I think updates, I hope that updates for all those were sent to the list prior to the call, to the meeting, I mean. Yes, Thomas.
Yeah, just maybe to give a brief update on the any data validation. There was a pull merge request in Lib Yang, and also we had like a hackathon last weekend.
Okay.
I will just send an email on the mailing list. Thanks.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Shafan is in queue.
Yeah. So this is regarding the any data validation draft. Is this adopted? Because the naming indicates that, but I haven't found the adoption call email on the list. Am I missing something? I just see the polling, RPR polling sent by Loop, but not the adoption call.
Oh, okay. We'll follow up on that if
Yes.
necessary. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Secretary. Okay, the liaisons and communications. We incoming liaisons, there are none. Outgoing, there's the one that we've had for a while now with the 3GPP. I don't know if anyone from 3GPP is attending this session, perhaps online, but I think their interest is with the immutable flag document, which we'll be talking about in this meeting. For this meeting, agenda, of course, right now we're doing the chair slides. There are 3 charter documents that are going to be discussed. First is the guidance for managing Yang modules and RFCs and IANA registries, then Yang packages, and lastly, Yang schema comparison. Okay, and then for non-charter items, we have the MAC address as string, Yang configuration templates, XML encoding of data modeled with Yang, and a baseline for Yang Next. And there's some time for an open mic. I mean, 15 minutes by schedule, but already we're a little bit running over, so we'll see how much time we have for open mic when we get there. For working remote, just, between the meetings, we do try to get work done. Everyone, please try to utilize the mailing list. Working group consensus is always determined on the mailing list. Mailing list is used for making working group decisions and having discussions. So we pretty much do all of our real work on the mailing list, and we meet 3 times a year just to, have that high bandwidth connection, but the actual decisions are made on the mailing list. We can have virtual meetings if ever desired for having a virtual meetings. Please ask the chairs to schedule one for you. One final note. In the future, we're going to ask authors of, and we do already, of working group documents to provide a status update to every working group document for every IETF meeting. So the status includes, at a minimum, the recent changes, open issues, what's the plan to complete. The update can be provided one of 2 ways. Preferably is a presentation here in the meeting, but alternatively, an email posted to the list before the meeting. And with that, we conclude and we'll go to our first presentation. Rob, I'm passing.
Hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, brilliant. So this document, I posted the latest version of this just either last night or this morning, depending on whatever time zone you're in. And effectively, this document is about providing guidance to IANA and also the RFC editor in terms of how to process Yang documents. Initially, the version aspects, but more widely, just has some guidance on how to process Yang documents. So I've knocked this up with help from LLM to get the initial version going. It's had some reviews by Rashad and Joe and Jason, and then Amanda and Sabrina have commented on the sort of early first draft, so has Sandy as well. So I've incorporated their reviews as well. So just a reminder how the whole thing fits together with a solution overview. So there's 3 of these drafts we've already sent to they're sort of sitting in the ISG queue or the post-working group queue, and there's this 4th document, this guidance for IANA and RFC editor that's sitting here. But potentially we want to move that one and send that fairly soon because we may have dependency from the other documents on this. And so, as I mentioned before, this document is from the abstract provides guidance to the RFC editor and IANA on managing Yang modules and RFCs and IANA registries, ensuring consistent application of Yang semantic version rules. So that's effectively what this is to do. And why do we have this document? Well, we met with IANA at IETF 124, and they asked for more guidance and more clear guidance on how to correctly apply the Yang version, as in how do you get this right in the IANA registries. And they also asked that this could be done in a document form to potentially inform future IANA members. So if the teams change, they'd like to have some sort of good stable reference they could point to help on board folks. And then the remit increased slightly to also cover guidance for the RFC editor at the same time, because it felt like these were fairly closely together. The goal of that was to move reasonably quickly, and hence this draft was written between IETF 124 and this one. The first version sort of sat there for a while, and then I've updated over the last sort of week and published later ones, addressed the comments that come through previously. The aim here is to try and get this to be published sort of roughly the same time as the other 3 version drafts. Don't even know it has to be exactly the same time, but it's so that we can potentially remove some of the IANA guidance document text in a couple of those documents and instead just rely on this one. So that's the reason why this is sort of trying to move reasonably quickly. As I said, the first version was mostly generated by an LLM with quite a lot of prompting guidance from me, quite a couple of efforts. I feel this was suitable in this particular case because really it's just putting together information that's already in other drafts and things that we've written. And the LLM did quite a good job of doing that and give you a reasonable starting point. It's a bit more verbose. And then the -01 version that I published last night was based on the feedback from Amanda and Sabrina and Sandy, and has quite a few edits, just sort of correct some LLM mistakes as well, and sort of shorten the document in various places where the LLM been a bit verbose when it's done. There's a few issues worth opening, but definitely if you're going to look at this, I'd look at the 01 version. So there's 4 open issues here. I've got a slide on each of these. One is, do we need guidance to IANA to list modules both by revision date and version? I find the final convention, I think we have a conclusion for that. The document is informational. Is it appropriate to use 2119 language? For the RFC editor and ADs, there's some question I have about to allow the RFC editor to be able to apply a RAT to IETF Yang models. So effectively using this versioning gives a path to do that. I think that's relatively clean. We don't document that today. And then a question that came up from Rashad about the section 5. This is a relatively minor one, is do we basically just reference the module version rules, similar rules, or do we have more text here? So just going to go over those each of those questions today. If there's time to get feedback on this, I'm running slightly over time, it would be good, because then I can update this. So the first one is, do we need guidance from IANA to publish list modules both by revision date and version, i.e. following the final convention? And this is the registry it looks like, and I've highlighted the bits what I mean. And my proposal is that, given we're moving to version numbers, is that we can just list them by version numbers here. Otherwise, if they don't yet have version numbers, they use revision dates. I don't know if there's going to be time to do polls for each of these questions now to go up to the chairs, whether you want me to go through the 4 issues and we can get comments across the list. I do notice that at least some of the IANA and RFC members are in the room.
Yeah, we can do a poll. I'll try to set it up real quick. Yeah, okay.
Should I go through? Should I cover the next issue? Okay, fine. So I can wait, or I can go for the next issue while you're writing the poll up. I don't mind.
Do you want to go through all of them and then go through
Yeah.
2 polls for each?
Okay, fine. Yeah. So issue number 2 is the document's information is appropriate to use 2119 language. And my proposal is yes, fine, unless there's strong objections. I'm not sure we really need to even poll on this one. I think we'll just, unless somebody wants to step up or say, definitely don't do this. I think this is an editorial decision, really. Issue 3 is for the RFC editor and ADs. Do we want to allow the RFC editor to apply errata to IETF Yang models? And at the moment, it's not in the scope of the current document, so we don't talk about that at all because our aim is to finish more quickly. And my proposal is potentially this deferred to the velocity draft. Basically, I'm saying we're going to wait for instructions to the AD if they want to expand scope. Mahesh, did you want to speak now, or do you want me to go through the fourth one and then come in?
He's saying go to the middle of the fourth one.
Fine, thanks. And the last one is, this is a minor one, is again, is should we give examples for the Semver rules? So again, the LLM's been very keen to be verbose in places, and it sort of copied in and references the Semver rules in terms of a non-backwards compatible change or backwards compatible change or an editorial change, but it also includes quite a lot of text there. And I've changed it to be using examples and cut down a bit, but I don't know if it should be cut down further. And so that's my proposal, is to keep it mainly as references, which is what it has, but keep some examples to make it easier for readers to consume and see. But again, if Rashad is online, I don't know if he's, yes, he is, then maybe he can have a look and comment on that since he raised that issue.
Okay, can we go back to issue
So that's
number
the
one?
four.
I have a poll primed for it. And Mahesh, wait
Yeah.
till we get back to issue number 4. Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
So on issue 1, I guess the question you're asking, I'm sorry, this is Mahesh. You're asking is, should the registry have just a version number module and not the date? So the question I would have is, does the registry allow for both? Is that, because it doesn't allow, that's why we are having to choose between the two?
I mean, Amanda or Sabrina can probably speak to this if they're in the room. I can't remember who, maybe it's Amanda in the room. I think you could modify the registry to have both if you wanted to. It's just whether it's worth having that extra column in there or listing both under the file. So I think it's probably a choice. But if we're going to update all the models to use version numbers, then going forward, that seems to be, to me, like a simpler choice. Like, do we really need both in there, I guess is my question.
Okay, so sorry, Ken, before you get in, since we have Anna in the room, could we get an opinion on it, maybe?
Well, actually, can I ask a question quickly?
Sure.
As a contributor, is the proposal to replace the highlighted bit on the screen with the hash Semver number?
Yep.
Yes, that's the proposal.
I also have a question as contributor. Wouldn't it facilitate transition to have both, at least for the time where we have tooling that doesn't understand Semver?
And Amanda has commented on the list to say we can do both.
Yeah, I mean, to Lou's comment there, just a quick reply is, yeah, we could do. I don't know whether there's any tooling that actually is relying on these paths being exactly that way, including the dates. In terms of when Per was looking at how easy it is to update tooling to handle both, is like it's a fairly small change to do that, I think. As in, it's not like a big tooling change. It would be impactful.
Right, but it still takes time for tooling to be rolled out, and
And my other comment would, would be that I think the documents might need a refresh also, because I think there is language in there that says both will be available. And so that's confusing if we say, no, well, we have both, but in the registry we'll only have one.
Do we still need a poll for this?
I'm not sure I have a conclusion from the discussion.
I think
Kent,
I
what
heard
do you think
Diana
of
saying that they could do both, and that there was some inconsistency if we don't do both. Therefore, we should do both. If that's my understanding. Mahesh is nodding his head as well.
So if you object, now is the time to come into queue. If you object with how Kent summarized the conclusion of the discussion, please join the queue.
Per, you're in queue.
Yes, I'm in the queue, and I don't object. This is the conclusion that I've reached for the file name document, that both revision date and version should be in the registry.
Okay, let's move to the next issue. Number 2.
Do we want? I think I'd say let anyone to speak up and say don't use 2119 language, then I was just going to keep it in. Amanda?
We can do both. I think one question we did have is whether the old modules that we keep in the repository available for download that are not linked from the registry anymore, if we are going to have to provide both versions of those. I mean, we'll have to calculate the version so that going forward, we can apply version numbers, but
That's a good question. I think our plan was to add version numbers for the older versions, but I don't know if we were going to then sort of republish those as such. I think we were just going to have the version numbers in terms of the history and the module to be correct when we publish the latest ones.
okay. I mean, they wouldn't be exact matches anyway, I suppose, since they'd have the version and the.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on this issue too, we'll be happy. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I thought your question, Amanda, was, is it okay if we are using 2119 and this, that's enough direction for IANA what to do, right? Or do they need it to be bumped up in, sorry, from an informational document? I think, is that the question you were asking, Amanda? Rob, I think I wasn't sure when you called up Amanda, what was the question?
I think Amanda was speaking to the previous issue, is my understanding. I'm sure she'll correct me on the list if not. But for this issue, it's like if there's any objections and they don't want to use the 2119 language, we won't. I definitely don't think we should bump this up from information. I think information is the right standard for this level. I don't think it'd be turned to standard structure would be a mistake.
I don't hear any.
It would be VCP if we were going to do that, but sorry.
Even that, I don't think it's, yeah. Okay. Do we move on to the next one, Kent?
Yes, please.
So issue 3 basically is do we want to bring errata into scope now for this document, or do we defer to the Velocity draft? Maybe Mahesh is the person to speak to this.
So somebody, maybe Rob, if you could refresh me on what is the idea of allowing errata? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting something here.
So at the moment, mostly for errata to YAML, which I said when I was an AD, I always had them hold for document update because you couldn't effectively republish the YAML model. There was no way you could republish it because that didn't make sense. And I guess you could have published them with extra revision dates, but they wouldn't have really appeared anywhere. Whereas now with Semver, you could potentially give some guidance to say, actually, if an errata was applied, then allow the RFC editor to republish that YAML model in IANA with a new version that incorporates that change, that update. And you know that effectively gets done, and then effectively you get a BIS version later, then it picks up the latest one of those. So it gives a path that you could actually then publish these documents, I think, and make it clear the errata is applied. Probably you could have done that before potentially, but maybe this makes it a bit simpler. But I don't know whether this is the document and place to do that process.
Okay, thanks for that context. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm in queue as a contributor. I'm aware of the fact that if the errata is a technical errata that's been approved, that IANA does in fact republish the Yang module already.
Does it?
It's been done once before. It's been done once
Okay.
before. It's just that most of the erratas are not either approved or not technical, and hence why so many of them have not been updating Yang modules since.
I think IANA is preparing a response.
David, IANA. As of right now, we don't republish the Yang modules with erratas, even if it's technical.
Okay, I can reply on lists. I'll point you to where it's been done before.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think regardless, I think the question we can choose, as you say, that we republish the Yang module. And I think, but this would still, it might be a question that the Velos project might have to answer is, how do we address erratas as they come along? So I think it's worth trying to find out, because I think it's just not INA modules, but also IETF modules. So how are we going to handle those?
Okay, Carl Kent.
No, go please
You
go to the
good?
next issue.
Okay, so is the conclusion? So just to check, the conclusion here is kept as out of scope for this document at this time. Is that correct? That's my read.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And the last one, I know I've used up extra time here. So again, Rashad, maybe you just check this one. You said issue 4 keeping examples is fine, as long as it's clear that SEMVer is a normative reference. Yeah, Rashad, you would come to the mic.
Yeah, I replied on the chat, so it's fine. I gave those comments a while ago, so I think I was concerned that the doc then was trying to be the normative reference for this. So if it's clear that that's not the case, no objection. Thank you.
Okay, can I just ask you to have another look at the -01 version for those the couple of sections, Rashad, to see if you think it looks okay now, and that'd be great. Thanks. So just what's left. So actually, these bits that I actually updated most of these like last night and things like that. So really, the updates that I think are open are these open issues, and then it's sort of further reviews. And as I mentioned earlier on the list, we could either do a round of reviews here, I think from before on this -01 or -02 after these issues have been addressed, or we could push it straight to working group last call potentially, but noticing it hasn't had that much in the way of reviews. So I think it's a question to the chairs and AD in terms of how quickly they would like this to go from that perspective.
Well, it seemed like there's a little bit of fit and finish that was needed, and then we could bring it to the working group as for last call.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, similar sentiment, but I just want to, I guess the main reviewers here are the INI and RFC editor. Yes, work group will have some comments, but I expect that I don't want to speak for them, but since there is a limited audience in terms of people who have to review this, we should be able to turn this around. I hope at least we can turn this around quickly.
Okay, thank you.
And that's it for this presentation, correct?
Yes, thanks.
There's a question on the chat saying, what's the state of the tooling? I don't know if you can talk to that, Rob.
I think Joe is going to be the best person to speak to that because he's been working on this, so he's coming to the mic.
If I may. Joe Clark, the examples Rob mentioned on his last slide mainly involve PyYang, though I have done an update. That's a PR for LibYang. The PyYang is a fork right now that I plan to push as a PR once we get more reviews on it. I feel with Rob's, Rob did a bash on session a couple of weeks ago. I feel it's in really good shape. PyYang will recommend the next SEMVer. It will use 7950 rules plus the new Yang module versioning rules. It will look for changes in when and must statements in descriptions and flag those as potentially semantic changing, so it could influence the version selection. It can assume a 1.00 on a module that doesn't already have a SEMVer and then suggest based on that. It does linting of SEMVers to make sure that they are syntactically correct. It's like I said, I think it's solid. My GitHub is out there. I can share the link on the list. I think I did last meeting, but I can share it again if people want to bash on a little bit more.
Sounds great. Thanks, Rob. I mean, Joe. Okay. Rob, did
Okay,
you
next.
start this?
Yep. Okay, so again, I'll try and be as quick as I can because I know I'm running over time a bit. So the Yang packages update, so this is version 07, so that's just been published, and we didn't publish one at the last IETF meeting, so so this is covering 2. And again, this is effectively where we are. Yang packages is like this 5th work item. There's potentially this 4B and IETF packages draft. We'll have to see in terms of that. I'm not sure whether I'll have time to work on that one. We'll see, but there's a potential one for describing those as well. So that might need some other people's help as well. But we are gradually getting through this entire list, which is good. So just a recap of what Yang packages are. So it's like an alternative mechanism for describing schema, which is like sets of Yang modules and features and deviations and map points together. Like, what do those actually define and describe? And it's similar to what Yang library provides, and a little bit similar to module sets, but it's done in a fully hierarchical way, as in it's designed to allow you to define a package that might cover a particular routing protocol and then absorb those into a package that describes a set of routing protocols and then absorb that into a package that defines an entire device and things like that, using different ways. They're all versioned in the same way that we sort of version modules. We're versioning packages using the Yang Semver, so you can see differences and changes of packages over time. The intention is that they should be made available offline and referenced by a URL. So one of the key aims of packages is that rather than the conformance check being done, that you have to download Yang library and compare Yang library to what you expect it to be. Instead, you can just download the package references, as in the name and which packages are being exported, and you already know the contents of those, and you can check very quickly in an easy way as to whether the schema is what you expect it to be or not. But it doesn't replace Yang library, it sort of sits alongside. Both can be used. So where are we? We've worked through open issues. We've closed or resolved 28 issues since IETF 124, so we've made some good progress there. There's 25 issues that are still open, but that sounds more than there really is, because 5 of those are sort of ready for last checks before closing them. We just need to get all together to close on those. There's good progress on quite a few of the other ones, so there's a lot less work than the remaining issue count implies, and the Yang package model definitely seems to be stabilizing, I think. So the hope is maybe to get to IETF last call before IETF 126. I'm not sure whether that is a bit too far out or not, but again, I think it's getting close to being done. So I'm going to go through the sort of changes, what has changed between the last 2 versions, some in more detail than others. There's been improvements to the terminology, a little bit more cleanup still to do there. There's been refinements to the Yang package definition rules to say you can't have circular package imports, some guidance on invalid package definitions, so from tooling experience, so it sort of says what things you can't do. And we do allow redundant information in packages, like if you include 2 packages, you're allowed to include information that you might not know has been invalid or is valid, but it's already been stated before, like you might express you want to turn a feature on that's already been turned on by one of the included packages, and that's allowed. The draft has a lot more guidance on package usage and talks about the difference between industry and SDO defined packages versus sort of vendor and device defined packages, a lot of different use cases. And we've given some updated considerations for listing modules within packages as being implemented versus import only. Now, if I remember correctly, the document doesn't say you must do one or the other. It just says, look, these are considerations you might want to take into account as to whether you want to list a module as being an import only module or implemented module. What else have we done? We've had some refinements to the package data model. I've got actually a picture of the Yang tree output on the next slide here. So there've been some small tweaks been made there. So we've defined a module name type to make that consistent using a replace. We've moved where features are. They used to be under their own top-level container of included and excluded features, and now they've moved under the main include and exclude lists. We've done some renaming of plurals to singulars for the lists. to be consistent with the Yang author guidelines. For the import-only modules list that used to have a replaces version, and we found a way to get rid of that, and instead we sort of list modules to be import-only modules to be excluded under the excludes list. And the reason for that is because whereas a Yang schema can only implement a single version of an implemented module that's defined by RFC 7950, you're allowed to effectively reference multiple included module versions. So we don't automatically get rid of those if you pick up two different imported only module versions from included child packages from this diagram earlier. So if I go just to explain that a bit more. So these two, if you had imports in say package D and package C, then different versions of an import only module, then package A would pick up both. And if you wanted to choose one in particular, you have to explicitly exclude them. So we've done that. Sorry, it was on this slide. And then mounts. We spent quite a lot of time on mounts. That's the last thing. It's always been one of the trickiest things. I talk about mounts a bit more further down, but we've replaced the replaces packages leaf with a single per mount inherited packages leaf, which I think I'll cover later. And I'll just put it up here. I'll leave it up here for a moment. The stuff in blue is the stuff where we sort of added or changed the various leaves. But I think there's one more thing that needs to go in this next version, but I think that hopefully we're getting to the point where we think that this is pretty much done in terms of this tree diagram, what's potentially changing. So what else has changed? So one of the changes that we had that has taken some thought is this ability for Yang packages to define a data store schema in the same way that module sets does from Yang library. So Yang packages augments into Yang library to define an equivalent schema using packages as is being defined using module sets. And one of the issues that came up on this is that if you use features, then under Yang libraries definition, all those features are listed under each individual module. We want to list them collectively as a single list or leaf list here. And without this extra supported features list, it was required that if you had a device that allowed you to dynamically enable or disable features, you would have had to publish new packages to say, this is the package with this feature enabled or disabled effectively, as in, which doesn't really work or make sense. And so we've added an extra supported features leaf list that's used alongside the list of packages to define the schema for a given data store, so the schema for device. So that's the new addition, and it's not in the version yet, but I think we'll have to do the same sort of thing for mount points as well for the same reasons. So I think we'll align those. We've added a .ypkg file type for Yang package files to make it easy what they are when they're stored. We've reworked the text on package conformance and added a new section of package comparison tools. We've updated the security considerations to align them with the latest templates. We've added and updated the IANA considerations. I know there's a comment from IANA, I still need to act on this. So we're defining a new Yang package registry like the Yang module registry for listing packages that are defined by the IETF. And we also now, that's part of the IANA considerations, define this .ypkg package file type as well. Mounted packages, as I said, this is the one that sort of caused us the most problems and add various complexities. So the reason that mounted packages are complex is that removing mounted packages from an included package is very tricky to model. When you're trying to resolve and work out the schema, that turned out to be something that's a sort of gnarly issue. There's also the case that with more or less specific mount points, so you could have a mount point that is generic, that has some keys on the path that aren't specified, and then a more specific version of that mount point that has some keys specified. What does that mean when you're trying to work out what the schemas are for those two different places. And then the third issue is there's a lot less industry experience with schema mount, as in it's not so widely implemented. It's in some places, and I think again because of that lack of experience, it sort of makes it sometimes harder what to figure out. So we spent quite a lot of time trying to figure out different choices here, and the latest solution is to go with a very simple answer, and that is that by and large we assume that when you're pulling in mounted packages from other included packages, and let me just jump back to this diagram here. So what I mean is if package B here and package D defined packages you'd expect to find on a mount point, perhaps like on a VRF mount point, then package A by default would basically get the collection of all the packages that are defined by B and by package D. So it gets the union of the schemas, and that works reasonably well. And that's the default behavior. So it means effectively when you're coming along and adding extra things in, extra packages and extra modules you'll find at mount points, it works nicely. What doesn't work so well is if you want to do things that are different and remove them or change features. And our conclusion to this is simply to have a flag that says, I want you to start from scratch. I want to start from a clean slate at that mount point. So again, I'm not sure I'm explaining this particularly well, but it would mean that in this example, you could say if package D said you're going to find IETF routing mounted at the VRF mount point, then package B could say, actually, no, you're not going to find that. You're going to find vendor routing that then includes IETF routing, but deviates away some modules and adds some deviations and things like that. So we think we've added a way of solving the technical problem in a fairly simple way. Oops. But it's potentially, we don't know if it's the ideal solution. We think it's a good enough solution for now, and we can refine this better in future as we get experience. And as I said earlier, I think we probably need to add the list of supported features under a mount point. So I think that's the last change we need to make to the schema. So what's left to do? So there's still some issues to go through, as I mentioned. The key things really is to finish off the examples and expand on those. I need to do some tooling updates just to validate those as well. We need to finalize the mount points, as I said, and update the description, add supported features. So there's a little bit of tweaking there. We need to define a package that you can use to define the schema for instance data files. So that will be relatively easy to do, and some relatively minor issues to resolve. So at this stage, I think the document's pretty good state, although it's not quite complete, to get more reviews from the authors and from the working group to sort of to progress it. So I think that would be good. So we're still meeting Tuesdays 9 AM Eastern time to discuss the packages draft. And as I said, we're going to work through those particular things. There's more work progress on the tooling I want to do. I'm hoping I can make that open source. I think I need to sort of finish that off and then go through the steps internally to see if that's allowed. But I think that would be useful. And any questions or comments? So that's where I'm at.
We should probably move right along just because the previous discussion ran over a little bit.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Waiting for slide control, or do you want to? Okay, got slide control. My name is Per Andersson, and I will present Yang schema comparison on behalf of the authors. Yang schema comparison is an algorithm for comparing two revisions of a Yang module and determining the scope of changes and list the changes between revisions, particularly backwards compatible and non-backwards compatible changes. It does so by defining a Yang module describing the output of the comparison algorithm, and the algorithm can help to select the appropriate revision label or Yang semver, since it reports BC or NBC changes. The solution and terminology then, the Yang module is IETF Yang schema comparison, and the parsed schema is the actual Yang source, and compiled schema is the data on the wire. Let's see. So changes since the last IETF meeting. The issues raised are cleared. There are some document updates, text for compiled parse schema changes. The Yang module is updated. The example included is updated. The terminology has been updated and some editorial changes. And the libyang reference implementation is completed. So the compiled parse schema changes, the changes generated are either only for the compiled schema or both for the compile and parse schema. So the method to signal this is via an if feature in the IETF Yang schema comparison Yang module. And if both changes for compile and parsed are generated, first the compile changes are reported, and then the parsed changes are reported, skipping the compiled if they would occur in both. So a change is only reported once, not in both categories. And the Yang module updates in general, there's now support for all parse schema statements. The schema tree structure has been unified to include both the compile and parse schema, clarified some wording about backwards compatible extensions to an instance that it will be true for all substatements as well, if it's added to an extension instance. And then we have all of the Yang module updates. I won't go through them in detail, but we can look at it later if you're interested, or take it on the list, or review the document. But all the statements have been, these are all the statements that have been added. And here we go for the second part. Same here. A lot of stuff have been added, so it's a complete solution. And the grouping for the module substatements now includes all substatements to our module definition. And the lists that have been defined for extensions, feature, identity, and deviation changes have now been changed to presence containers instead, and they only exist if there is a difference. Same goes for these updates. The details are something we can look at later in the presentation if it's interesting. Updated the example that is present, the compiled module example is now changed into something called a relaxed range module. The diff for this example now shows both the compile and parse changes. The terminology updated is the following: that the module data node and data definition statement is a reference from RFC 7950, and the backwards compatible and non-backwards compatible terms have been referenced from a Yang versioning requirements document. And regarding the implementation, the libyang reference implementation is completed. It supports the full Yang schema comparison Yang module, and it, as I said previously, supports both compiled and parsed schema changes. And the next steps, we ask for testing and feedback by users, ideally with their custom Yang modules. We discussed evaluating Joe's Piang schema comparison algorithm that can detect editorial changes as well, if that could be incorporated and improve the algorithm that is proposed. Investigate some the feature interaction with Yang packages, add some more examples to the document if that would be helpful for the readers. Some final editorial touches, and when all of the above is done, then let's go for working group last call. Thank you. That is it. Questions, if we have time.
Are you asking for any specific feedback?
I would urge users to test the reference implementation and bring feedback.
I see Joe's in the queue.
Otherwise, a general read-through of the document would be beneficial.
Hey, Per, minor point maybe on the previous slide. I think it was 13. New, maybe 12. The one where you said you linked there. You referenced the versioning recs for backwards compatible and non-backwards compatible. I don't know if it makes more sense to do the Yang module versioning, because I think the intent of this document is just to expire ultimately when we're done with all the work. I don't know what the ramifications of that would be. We do talk extensively about backwards and non-backwards in Yang module versioning.
Yeah, I think I looked at the terms if they exist there in the terminology section, but I'll take that into account. Thanks.
All right, we are running short on time, so I think we'll move to the next presentation. Thank you, Per.
Thank you all.
I think it's past the clicker control. Should work. See if we can make up some time, please. I did the yes button.
Did you give me control?
No, I didn't.
Thank you. Well, this is a presentation. I'm Scott Mansfield Erickson. This is a presentation that has been given in a different form to this group and also talked about at IETF. And it's a very interesting problem to me. It comes up on the IETF IEEE liaison call from time to time. And the root of the problem is that the example that we're using is MAC address comparison, but it really is a problem with all strings. So if you have a string and it uses a key and you need to compare the strings, sometimes there are strings that are semantically the same, but the format's a little different. We didn't really have this problem in SNMP because of the way MAC addresses were stored. But anyway, there is an issue about strings and string comparisons and used in certain use cases. And the use case that we were looking at is MAC address in this case. Because if you look at the IETF format, the canonical format is different than the canonical format in 802.1. And I have a long presentation that explains all the history behind all of this, which I will not go over now. Just suffice it to say that one uses colons, one uses dashes, but then it's also about one of them uses uppercase letters and one of them uses lowercase letters. So you can't just say canonical and make the problem go away because the canonical formats are different. So, and I just said this slide. And 9911 is done. So everybody clapped already. So we'll say that. But that's good. And so the issue with the strings is what I would like to see is one of several things. And Rob and I have been chatting through the issue list in Yang Next about this a little bit. And one thing, I have a list here. These are the options. One option is we create something new and deprecate both of them, and everybody uses the same canonical form. We can modify the pattern so that anything's allowed. We can add something to the Yang language that indicates all strings are equivalent. And so that's what we've been kind of talking about. If there's just a canonical flag that could be added so that the programmers know that they have to go look into description to determine what's canonical and what's not and what the comparisons are. We could change the way MAC address is done. We can do nothing, whatever. So this is, I put it in the format of a internet draft at the request of, I don't forgot who requested it. but I put it in as a internet draft so that there'd be something for people to read. If they want to see history, they can come ask me more about the history of this. I've got lots of presentations on this. And matter of fact, I think I might have, did I put more in here? No. Okay, so not just a MAC address problem, looking for a more generic solution rather than just fixing the MAC address problem. I know there's an issue with the draft. I didn't put the right thing into the draft, so I need to fix that. And then looking for ideas and consider contributing to a solution. And I notice Rob's in the queue, but you're the chair, so you tell me.
Oh, I think I know what Rob's going to say. Please, Rob, go ahead.
So I basically, well, I could say two things. One is I think that this part of this could be covered under Yang next. So I think that's the right place that we could potentially make a change, but I'm not sure, again, necessarily whether this should go in particular the next version directly, but that might be a good place to discuss this. The other thing is I think we should separate the MAC address issue of canonicalization versus other ones. So we have this issue just of given where you got a single type, and it has a canonical definition that's written in the description, and having a way of actually having the tooling be aware of that and know that it needs to do some special case handling. I think that's a different problem. The one specifically for MAC addresses, this reason I think has always been is like an organizational issue, is that the IEEE and IETF have two different definitions and they're sort of not budging and agreeing. And I think that's the only way you can sort of solve that, or accept you can't solve it. I don't think we should write extra rules in the language to sort of cover that particular case. I think there's an organization issue where it has to be that both sides agree, and maybe they both say this is the canonical format if they can agree with that, but I don't know. That's what I think.
Well, as a reaction to that, this has been going on for 10 years, and that convergence hasn't happened. So that's why I'm looking for a generic way for Yang to solve a problem that says I have a canonical form that I want to conform to, but I have a different display format, kind of like what SNMP did, right? With display hints, and I know that that's not a popular thing, but if the problem is solved where you can say there's a canonical form and these two strings are equivalent if they follow these rules and put that in the description, and that would solve the problem, and then the whole thing would go away. It's not just for MAC addresses, but the MAC address problem would go away if you had that kind of capability in the language. So
I'm putting myself in queue as a contributor. I think already it's the case that, like, for instance, if we modified the pattern statement to allow for both, then it does suggest that both are allowed, and presumably servers would know how to read both formats. The issue is not so much when the data is going into the server, but when the data
comes
the
out.
server responds to data.
Right.
Because at that time it's expected that it's going to return the data in the canonical format.
Correct.
So IEEE loses the format that they prefer.
Right.
Hence the display hints desire. And internally, the canonical format would also be used by, say, must or when expressions, but I don't think that's a concern to IEEE. I mean, it'd be fine, I imagine, for in the Yang module, if I had a must or a when expression to refer to the quote, canonical IETF canonical format.
Right.
That wouldn't be a big deal. It's just when the data has been returned. That's
and the issue that I have with just making and it says it's the second bullet. If the permissive pattern allows both, then when it comes back, then you're not sure that it's going to come back in the format that the other thing is using anyway. So that's not really an answer. We have to have some way to determine programmatically how these two things are the same. And so if, again, one of the solutions we have is to continue to do nothing and complain about this and talk about it in another 10 years. But I don't think that there's going to be any change in what IEEE has in theirs. I don't think IETF is going to change because of where we are. We just need a way to make sure that if there are modules that use both, which there could be in a system where you use some IEEE modules and some IETF modules, that there isn't a problem when you go to compare a MAC address. That's what I'm looking for. Anyway, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, Scott. And I do believe we clawed back some time. That's great. And I see that Shafan is stepping up to speak to the template document, but it reminds me I wanted to say something about the immutable flag document, which is currently in the Shepherd queue. And I believe that there's just a small remaining interaction, like a response I'm waiting for on the immutable flag document. Also, the liaison that we mentioned at the top with 3GPP is with the immutable flag document. And I mean, okay, so there's been some discussion after IETF 124. Some people made a comment that there is some configuration that could be configured that would potentially become immutable. And the example that was given was, for instance, if the default configuration format to date was ASCII, but then there's a potential that the server could upgrade the data to support UTF-8, that it'd be a configurable flag. The client could specify to say, I want to use UTF-8, but that's a one-way conversion. In thinking about this with others, the thought was that, well, that could then, that configuration leaf, while it was configured and running, could then, the system could replicate it in system, and then it would effectively be immutable. And so perhaps if 3GPP or anyone interested in that liaison is listening to this conversation is interested in pursuing that discussion further, please reach out to me and others on the mailing list. And I really should have done the slides while I was talking.
Yes, so based on that discussion and conversation with Kent, I think maybe the authors need to submit a revision. And if there is any objections from the working group, just feel free to speak up. And otherwise, we will just move forward and go ahead. Okay, so this is presentation is about the Young configuration template work. And on behalf of the author team, I'm presenting this today. So a recap, maybe could start with two virtual interns to discuss the template requirements. We have a repo to collect all the requirements that we wish to address for the template solution. And at that two virtual interns, around 20 requirements were reviewed and discussed. And the show of hands polling just decided the valid ones. And it's also worth mentioning that even after the interim meetings, there are still additional requirements were submitted. So, which I will show in later in this presentation. And based on the discussion, the authors have submitted this draft to document, try to capture the requirements and the initial solution of the template configuration. So the solution overview is that we have defined the what is a configuration template, which is actually a fragment of configuration and is defined in running. And node in running can just apply one or multiple templates to which can expand the configuration in intended. And any configuration from templates can also be overridden by the explicitly provided regular configuration. So the change in the version 2 is that some based on the, I think the last presentation given by my co-author, we have updated the draft. We have added a couple of new sessions. The session to add to talk about the deletion of templates, the operational consideration, and also we had added a new appendix session to document, track the requirements implementation status. So there are still some open issues, but so for this specific presentation, I just would like to focus on the two top priority open issues that we would like to see converges. So the first is about the validity of template at definition time, and the other is about how to model the contents of a template. So the following two slides is about the requirement implementation status. I guess I don't have a lot of time to focus on these two slides. I invite the working group to review these two slides, and especially for those that have not been implemented and fulfilled in our existing draft. And because those are the ones that we believe more discussion is needed. And also, I need to mention that there is a note at the bottom of the slide. So the requirements that is mostly opposed in the polling have not been taken into account, and nor have editorial requirements, because someone read some related, a very specific issue related to our draft, like they would like to see some examples. Those are not really some technical requirement that has not been included in this table. So the open issue discussion, the first is about that must template be valid when defined. So this this issue has been discussed as an interim, but the show of hands polling as an interim really shows a split opinion. Even we are unsure if the no opinion is because they just oppose to the entire idea, or to doing it in a first release. So the current draft states that at the definition time, the template content does not have to be fully valid, because the authors believe that it's just maybe it's just impossible to do that, because you can miss the mandatory node, for example. So it doesn't have to be fully valid. But wherever the validation is possible, for example, if there is a range statement to bound the value spaces, and so the server could validate the template configuration against that statement, then the server should enforce these constraints in the template. But at the expansion time, because the template expansion is present in the intended, and intended must always be valid as per NMDA. So configuration after template expansion must always be valid. So this is really the existing solution we are proposing in the current draft. So I want to ask the working group, is this acceptable, or if there is any objections from the working group?
Hi, this is Kent. First, as chair, I just want the working group to know that we have time in our schedule to discuss these items. So let's try to spend some time to unblock these issues. And on this particular item, I want to bubble up what is the actual concern. And so if we're not talking about pushing configuration to a candidate data store, and we're just pushing it to running, already it's the case that immediately it would be merged, the templates would be flattened and put into intended, and intended is subject to validation. So immediately, if there's any validation errors, that would come back as an RPC error as part of the running commit response. So I think there's no issue when we're talking about pushing to running. I believe the issue is solely when pushing configuration to candidate. And I think the issue could be characterized as, are we wanting to provide early warning response versus late warning, like at the time that the candidate is being merged to running. So first off, is that characterization correct?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Okay, so I think early warning is probably something everyone can agree with. That's not a bad idea. Sooner you can warn someone that they've done something bad or wrong is good. The details goes into perhaps implementation and how it's done. And I wonder if this is something that needs to be standardized. Like, what is it that the document needs to say versus an implementation detail? Because in my mind, it could be an implementation detail. Already, it would be possible for any implementation at the time that an update is being pushed to a candidate to silently or internally do the equivalent of flattening and merging to the to like an intended, validating that and seeing if it can provide a validation error and reply with that. So it could be thought of as an implementation detail. So I'm wondering to the room, and I'll stop here. To what extent we think this needs to be defined in the document? James, you're next in queue.
Thanks, James coming. Couple of questions. We talked about mandatory here. If a mandatory is defined in the template itself and it's validatable, how would you kind of intended to deal with that one, particularly if the template's not applied? I think it may tie into a later issue that you probably are going to talk about in terms of whether the template appears at all in intended. But maybe you could comment on that one.
Yeah, maybe just move to when we move to that open issue, then I will discuss.
Perfect.
Yeah. Thanks. There anyone else in the queue?
Well, I just want to reply. I'm not sure if the next issue is, in fact, if it's not this issue, but yeah, we may come back to this issue.
Yeah, these two open issues are
I think
kind of
James is onto
related.
something. We need to discuss that. Are you still in queue, or you want to remove yourself? Okay, Deepak.
Hi, Deepak. I was one of the person who was supporting for the validation in the poll. A couple of things. One is early warning. Of course, I agree there. And the second point that you were saying that it immediately gets expanded, right? That's not true here in this case because we define it under the any data container and it gets expanded only we apply the metadata apply template. So
and that was James' comment. If it's applied, or when and for the case when it's not applied.
Yeah, and second point is of course 7950 always says running must be valid. So I do support validation at definition itself.
So we have a lot of discussion about the validity of intended and the validity of running when we do the system configuration work. And I think folks agree that usually the server can, I mean, if intended is valid, then running is effectively valid. And intended is a data store that contains the expansion of template. So from this point of view, actually, my personal would think there is no need for the server to just validate the template itself at definition time.
Italo Busi, Huawei. I agree with what I see in this slide because if I have a mandatory attribute and I have to put that in the template, it may be that I have 10, 20 templates which are the same, but differs only for this mandatory attribute. So this makes the template proliferation for nothing. And then if I want to change all these 20 templates, I have to do 20 actions to change all of them because I want all these 20 templates to be the same, but I want to apply to them to different configuration of these mandatory attributes. So at least for the mandatory true, I see a lot of value not to validate at the template definition, but only at the expansion time. For the range, pattern, and length, it's clearly something you can validate at the definition time. So maybe I tend to agree with what I see in this slide. That depends really on the type of validation we want to apply.
Thanks.
Okay, Kent as contributor again. I think I also want to agree with this. So for the case where the template is not being applied, and therefore it's not possible for the implementation to do that behind the scenes, flattening to the equivalent of intended and validating the intended, then what? And I almost, to Italo's point, if you have a leaf that's mandatory true, the template in isolation doesn't know that in the context in which it will be applied, that leaf will then subsequently become present, and therefore it's perfectly fine. If there were validation done at all on a per template basis, it would probably have to neuter or eliminate all the mandatory truths and all the min element and max element expressions, because you just don't know in the context that template will be used later on. So to what, certainly you could do some validation, like field level, type level, like if it's a number, you could validate its number. If it's a string that has to have a pattern, you could test that. So there's, some high level validation that could occur. Type level validation that could occur even before the template's been applied. But other things that are, Yang level validations, I don't think it's possible because in isolation, it's a subset of the whole.
Hearing you, I'm thinking maybe the key characterization is the validation that do not depend on the instance, on the expansion, can be done before you expand. like you said, if it is a string and I put an integer, no matter how to expand, this is not going to work. So I can do now all the validations that depends on how do you expand the template must not be done because they have to be done. I think that's maybe the clarification criteria between what can be done and what must not be done. Just thinking what hearing to you or your examples.
See, Rashad, you're next in queue.
Yeah, so I have a quick question. And first, apologies, I haven't looked at the draft since last IETF. So I agree with what's there and what Italo and Ken said, but do you have other examples apart from mandatory nodes? Like, would it be when statements or must statements? What kind of other things could cause the template to be not valid?
Well, I mentioned minikers. Or sorry, I said minikers. I meant min elements. Or how about a range expression? Maybe not range.
Okay. I'll take a look at the doc, but this looks good.
Deepak, to add to Rishad's point, I think we can also consider invalid hierarchy or leaf refs uh, in the content, and the leaf to which it is pointing to doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's one example. That makes more important to have a valid configuration of the template.
Yeah, so I will finish my the presentation and then we can like do a polling maybe at the end of the.
Sure. Okay. But Rob, I see you just posted something to the chat. Did you want to speak to that?
Okay, fine. So as opposed to saying, I wonder if this ends up being very similar to the NMDA draft when it talks about operational, and effectively it says like the syntax of all the values must be enforced and things, but there's a set of semantic constraints that you don't necessarily have to enforce in operational data. And I wonder if it's sort of a similar set here. Maybe mandatory is an exception, but I think that's the sort of right solution here. So I agree with what's being proposed in this slide. You should validate what you can, but don't expect to be fully valid, and then you validate it when it's applied in the intended data store. And from that, running, if intended is valid, then running is implicitly valid at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, let's do the next slide and then we'll do polls.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So the next open issue is that how to model the contents of template. So currently the template configuration is modeled as any data in the draft. So for example, you could contain a fragment of the configuration using the IETF interfaces model, and you can also be the fragment of a configuration using any other modules that just supported by the server. However, we also admit some limitations of using any data here. The first is that there is actually no schema to declare what a fully valid template is. But I think this is really depend on whether should we mandate template validation at definition time. So if we don't want to validate template at definition time, maybe this is something that is just fine and it can work. And the other limitation is about because the any data is is not transparent. So it's not possible for the client to edit part of the template or calculate the data change. So any update of the template configuration would require the client to send the entire template configuration. So that's another limitation that to use the any data. So to think further whether there is any other alternative that we could use instead of using the any data to model the template configuration. So maybe we could James has already touched this option, which is about maybe the server could automatically derive a schema. So the authors have not really think it through, but just try to provide some food for thinking. So maybe we could consider model the content as a presence container, and for each YAML module that the server supports, when the client just define a template, and then the server could derive a second template model, and that augments the template content that presents container. So for example, if the server implements the interfaces module, and when that template configuration is defined, the server will derive a second model to augment the content. So to a client, the template content just another young container whose contents is all the configuration that could live in that template. For example, if if there is no mandatory if no mandatory node provided, then the derived schema young can just drop that mandatory node. So so this has some implementation complexities here. But maybe it could be a feasible way to allow the validation of template at the definition time. So the question to the working group is, does the value of this option deserve such an implementation complexity? So this is my last slide.
Yeah. So I think James, you're in queue.
So you had mentioned that we don't have a way to validate. We don't know what schema is for the data included in the template. And I guess that's based on the premise that any data isn't validatable. Is that right? Because if any data were validatable, you could reasonably say, like we do with every other part of data, that the first element needs to have a namespace, and that namespace obviously tells you the schema, and at that point you know your schema, which is what we do for the main portion of data. And
yeah, so else. I also should mention that there is I mean, there is an effort in the working group to discuss the validation of any data. So maybe there is another option for this work to just reference that work and to say that you could rely on that effort to validate your template at definition time.
And then if I understand your other option, which I think is probably actually two options. One is you could duplicate the schema and use that in its entirety as a new schema for a template, which I think is a valid way of doing it, but obviously has some downsides. And the other way, it seemed to be very similar to the full embed draft that was proposed a while back.
Yeah, but it has expired now, right?
Yeah, yeah, it has. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, unfortunately, I did like the full embed draft. I hope that it gets resurrected at some point. Robert, you're next in queue.
I think that any data is the right answer here. I think this is what Yang has for modeling this sort of data. I think this is what any data is designed to do. And so the validation side, I think that we should try and look at to see if we can solve that part of it. And maybe Alex has put in there, would that draft help? I'm not sure. I think there's further complexities in terms of validating it. So I'm not sure that's necessarily the answer. But again, I think try to work out what the answer to validating any data should be, and then use any data here is my suggestion.
Thanks.
So if I remember from the template requirements analysis that was performed, this item, the desire to validate templates at definition time, was it like partially supported? Do you remember what the scoring for it was?
Split, I mean, partial, there is mixed.
Mixed
opinion.
Mixed opinion, that's what it was, right? And I think with a mixed opinion, it was unclear if it was actually mixed because folks didn't want to do it at all versus just not in the first release. So is that, are we still kind of at that point where we're unclear if it's something that could be deferred to a future item, or?
Yeah, maybe that could also be considered if.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to the first issue. So we can do poll. I don't know, Lou, have you primed a poll, or should I do it?
Deepak, do you want to comment?
Yeah, that's the open point we want the working group to address. I mean, are we agreeing that we need to validate our definition, or I mean, are we still in the same interim phase thought process?
I think that's what the poll is. Are you on the issue number 1 right now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay,
yeah.
great. Okay, so we discussed this when Shafan presented it, and actually I heard a lot of agreement in the room. In fact, I'm not even clear if I heard any differing opinion. Everyone felt that early warning was a good thing. I mean, there's some issues like mandatory nodes. Obviously, you can't really validate them. And Rob posted and spoke to the mic about other cases in that are we know about that can't be validated. Um, but yeah, I actually heard a lot of consistency there. So I guess I don't know, Lou, do you have a poll or should I do this?
I actually agree with your summary. I don't think we need a poll.
Yeah. Okay, I'm actually seeing a lot of nodding occurring in the room right now. So let's just agree that we agree with this item well, I don't know if the title is correct. Must template be valid? I mean, it's a best effort. It's a best effort.
Yeah. So
And
I guess
So the current draft language is acceptable, is where we are. And, there's certainly be opportunity for people to object down the road, but we don't have to ask this question again until someone raises an objection.
okay. And then now you want to move to the next
yeah.
issue?
So can we just go ahead with the any data to model the template?
I think I heard some differing opinions on this one, so a poll is probably a good thing. Let me do that. Can we use any data? Okay, a poll has begun.
By the way, it's not a leaf. I mean, just the content is modeled as any data.
Okay, that's true.
But it's okay. Yeah.
You're right. It's not a leaf.
Yeah.
I'll just mention I put in no opinion because I actually think it's too early to decide. Speaking as contributor.
Okay.
Yeah, Jim, I also put in no opinion because I think whether it's validatable any data or unvalidatable any data is probably key to the decision.
And I put yes, but I'm assuming that the any data validation draft is going to come, and then that will provide the support we're looking for.
I think you need to restate the question because I think you'll get a very different answer with that phrasing, Kent. If you can restate it exactly as you just said. Yes, assuming that the any data validation moves forward.
Okay.
Maybe just one comment, Deepak here. I think the point on the delta change is important in making a decision whether we need to use any data or not, because we were talking in the interim about a living template, which could automatically be updated in runtime and it gets applied to the consumers. But then with this being any data, the whole container is opaque and it doesn't support any operation. So that's something that we need to consider. Yeah, I think.
So I think right now we're only talking about living templates. There's no like not living template. That's the solution. I've reposted the poll with a clarification that assuming that the any data validation draft is published.
Does the person who said, or the people who said no opinion, want to make a comment on why they're saying no opinion, if they're meaning something else?
Yep, James Cumming, one of those is me. The outcome of what the any data draft validation draft says is important here as well.
So that's also the reason why I asked the status of that draft, whether it's adopted or not.
I think there's, I think we're getting a sense of the room that people like the notion of any data, assuming the any draft, any data draft moves forward in a reasonable fashion, but we don't know where it's going to end up. So if it ends up in the right place, people will be happy. If it ends up in the wrong place, we'll have to see. But we should move on because we're eating into Kent's time as presenter.
Okay, great. Thank you, Siobhan.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm joining the queue instead of presenting slides. All right. Let's see. Can someone ask me to go to point the camera towards the chair's desk? Okay, so Kent Watson as a contributor presenting the XML encoding of data modeled in Yang. And if that title seems familiar to you because it's identical to the RFC 7951 with simply the string JSON replaced with string XML. So, introduction for this work, in preparation for Yang Next, it is desired to create a baseline document for that effort. And the baseline, in my opinion, and actually I had some pleasant breakfast reading. Rob Wilton posted a document last night. But the baseline, it needs to remove the XML specific bits, the netconf specific bits, things that aren't really germane to data modeling should be removed. And so that's what that baseline effort is about. And that, so specifically speaking to the XML bits that we want to remove from RFC 7950, that is what this document is about. It is the home for that information. It has nothing to do with the netconf specific bits. It's just the XML specific bits. How is this document created? First, copy, paste, edit RFC 7951. This is Lada's document, and the whole outline of it seemed correct and proper, and it should be used. And effectively search, replace JSON with XML. And there was, of course, lots of JSON-specific examples, and each and every one of those got converted to the equivalent XML example. Removed any additional or specific JSON-specific bits. So, that document talks about using prefixes. The module name is a prefix, and so that text was removed, and then massaged remaining text to be XML specific. A few things here and there. Once that was done, then it was the effort was to relocate the bits from RFC 7950. So section by section, and almost entirely, it was primarily the XML encoding rules sections. Those rules were appearing in 7950 under various data nodes, and he was talking about how do you encode a leaf, how do you encode a container, so if essentially moved those that content from or copy pasted that content from 7950 over into this document in the appropriate spot. The XML comments show the details. If I know we all normally look at the text and the HTML renderings of the document, but if you look to the XML of it, you'll notice that there's comments in the XML, and it tells you exactly where the parts came from. Here's an example. It happens to be for the leaf data node, but it starts off with a comment saying that this part is from RFC 7950, section 7.6.6. And then there's another comment saying that it was a copy paste edit from 7951, section 5.1. And you'll find comments like that throughout the XML. So if there's any question about where did that content where was it sourced from? This is trying to alleviate any concerns that new content was created. In fact, I should state up front that there's no change that's being brought here. It is the it's intended to be the identical encoding that was, provided by 7950. It's just simply been moved to a different document. And here's sort of the proof, the traceability matrix, if you will, of that. I would say that the document is almost ready for publication, even though it's not even adopted yet. The document is nearly complete. It could be published as is, but there's a few things to discuss. First is the NEXML node. It's a given, I believe, that Yang 2.0 will remove the NEXML node. In fact, it's Yang Next issue 105. And so it makes little sense to publish this document with NEXML. And actually, it's likely best to coincide. It's likely best to coincide publication of this document with the Yang Next document, in the same way that RFC 7951 was published alongside RFC 7950. The numbers are one after the other. So whatever number is being provided to Yang Next, this could be the +1 to that. And, so we don't need to publish it currently. I don't necessarily want to stick in the, I imagine the Yang Next document will last a long time, years, so not too many, hopefully. I'm looking at Joe, he's thinking about the packaging, Simber effort, I'm sure. Hopefully not too many years, but it's not going to be quick. Whereas if we wanted to publish it, we could publish this quickly. Another option would be to go ahead and last call it, put it into RFC editor queue, but then it'd sit in Mahesh's or the AD's queue, and it would turn red and it'd be in the triple digit numbers, and that'd be that's not good either. But that's process details. Okay, that's the first issue. The second issue is certain schema only nodes. When going through RFC 7950, I found there were some sections that were XML encoding rule type sections, having to do with what I would call schema only nodes, such as choice and uses and RPC and action, notification and augment. These don't actually appear themselves in the data tree. And yet there was some discussion, some text around how they're encoded. I don't know. It's not clear to me whether or not these, maybe they stay in RFC. Yang Next. The RFC 7950 biz document. It's not a biz, but that document. They stay in that document, but they're not. They're converted from being XML specific to just being like more generic encoding specific. Anyway, so those are the two issues, and that's it. Any questions, comments, or concerns about this work?
And I will run a few questions when we're ready. Did I see someone coming to the mic in the room? I couldn't tell. All right, so the first question is there a general interest in this document at all? Assuming I can get this in here. So this is a simple yes/no poll. Is there interest in this? Okay, so that was quick. I think that's overwhelming interest, at least by the participants. Although I'll note that the participant, it's less than half the people in the room. But I think this is still a good indication that there's interest in this work. So that's awesome. The next question is a little different. It's actually going back to the discussion of that Kent had earlier about do we wait or not wait? So should we publish, should we look at moving forward as is, or should we wait for Yang Next? So yes is don't wait. No is wait for Yang Next. So ignore the no. It really means wait for Yang Next. No opinion means you don't like the question, or you don't want to answer one of the other ones. Okay, so this is about the same number. And frankly, I'm shocked at the answer. To me, there seems to be a lot, as a contributor, it seems like to be a lot of value if we just publish as is and not wait the years Kent was alluding to about waiting for Yang next. But that's not the working group opinion, which is cool. So that's great feedback. So the group thinks it's worthwhile, at least the group in the room thinks it's worthwhile to include the Yang next and not publish until that Yang next is done. All right, last poll. This is basically leading towards the adoption poll. Let's see how fast I can get this going. So should this document serve as the basis for a working group document on this topic? If the answers are overwhelming yes, we will end up doing a poll after the meeting, an adoption poll. So this is roughly the same distribution we've been seeing through these polls. If the person who said no is willing, I'd love to hear what their objection is.
Well, that was me, and I was just wondering with exactly the question that Kent asked is, okay, we adopt the document, and let's say it goes through the work group, and it lands on my desk. What do I do with it?
I think that was the previous poll. So if the previous poll was, should we hold on, should the working group hold on to it until
okay.
Yang next is ready?
So
it
okay.
actually would stay with the working group.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. I wasn't just sure whether, so yes, if the agreement is it's going to be tied to Yang next, and that's what the document is going to do. Absolutely, that's fine then. Thank you.
Yeah, I have to say I'll try to convince people to advance the document once it's stable, but you know, I'm just one voice as a contributor in that regard. Okay, so the conclusion of this is yes, we should run an adoption poll after this meeting. So Kent, that's great. If you want to move on to your next presentation.
Excellent. The Yang 2.0 data modeling language. So introduction, Yang Next has been discussed extensively. It started 10 years ago, actually in 2016, when the Yang Next issue tracker was created. And then about 3 years later, IETF 104, I think it was actually just before 104, there was a few meetings to try to score some of those issues. At that time, I think there were only 50 or 60 issues. There weren't that many issues, about half as many as there are today. So there was some scoring, and I gave a presentation. If you click on the link, you actually, it's a link to the presentation, and you'll see that presentation. And then it fell dormant for some time, 5 years actually. And it was actually it was an IETF 120, which was early 2024 when I resurrected and brought it back to the working group, saying, "Hey, let's bring this back and resurrect this effort, and we've got to move forward." There was some discussion. There was desire to go back to complete the scoring of the issues, for which there were 6 meetings. You can see August 6th, and August through October, 6 different meetings. Each meeting was roughly 2 hours long with a dozen participants. Many man hours were put into that discussion, which was then brought back to the working group in IETF 121. And again, these are hyperlinks. You can jump straight to the presentations if you want to see what those were about. But top level point here is that it's been discussed extensively. One of the discussion points was, what is Yang Next? The word next was as placeholder. We weren't sure. Is it a 1.2? Is it a 2.0? But based on those reviews, it was somewhat determined that it should be a 2.0. And the reason why, and first off, what we mean is that it's a minimally non-backwards compatible version of 1.1. What does that mean? It's mostly Yang 1.1 with a few non-backward parts. Like we just have to break backwards compatibility in a few places, but in terms of implementations and tools and whatnot, the hope and the goal, I think I speak for everyone, is that it wouldn't go too far off the rails. And I saw that in Rob's write-up when I was having breakfast this morning. You know, should we do a baby step, a 1.2, which would be a backwards compatible version of 1.1? That would seem undesirable. What I understood was that it was felt that it was be too disruptive with little benefit, not enough benefit. You know, for instance, there are many high, medium, important issues that are not backwards compatible. So if we did it, we just wouldn't be addressing the core issues, and hence uh, it's not really thought that a 1.2 makes sense. Hence a 2.0, and why the name of this draft is Yang 2. Notice it's not RFC 7950 biz, right? So it's not trying to obsolete Yang 1.1 and republish Yang 1. It is publishing Yang 2.0 in the same way that RFC 7950 did not obsolete RFC 6020. And in fact, there's coexistence, right? So 1.1 coexists with 1.0. And while these slides don't talk about it, there is a coexistence section that essentially says that 2.0 can coexist with 1.1 and 1.0. Whether or not that's actually possible, I don't know, but that's what the document currently says. And, you know, of course, it can be looked at in more detail as we go forward. How is the document posted a data tracker created? So on data tracker, if you look at that, and diff it against RFC 7950, you'll see very, very few diffs. It looks boring. But essentially, I got the XML from the RFC editor because back in the day, they didn't publish the XML, so I had to, as a special request, I converted it to the V3 format. And then I did some just high level, you know, editorial type items, replacing 1.1 with 2.0, replacing Martin with myself as the editor, adding a discussion venues section. I like it how Chiffon has done that to her documents with a pointer to the GitHub tracker and everything. And I had to fix some out-of-date references per ID NITs. So, you know, for instance, 69911 is now 9911. The keyword section had to be updated to add the new BCP 8174, and I updated the acknowledgements and contributors section. But you know, top level here is that's the absolute minimum that was, you know, possible, I think, in order to actually publish something to Data Tracker that it would accept. You can, of course, click that link for diffs. The document posted to Data Tracker is not the baseline. The presentation title of this presentation is a baseline for Yang Next. That is not the baseline. It's a baseline for the baseline, if you will. The actual baseline intends to be a starting point for the Yang Next changes. Essentially, the actual baseline, what this presentation is about, is just trying to remove the XML and netconf specific bits from RFC 7950. And so how is the baseline document created? Well, first off, you might say, well, where is the baseline document? Well, it's in a branch. It's in GitHub. It's in a branch. I think the next slide points to it. So there is a document. How is it created? First, the abstract and introduction sections were updated to be 2.0 oriented. Created a summary of changes from RFC 7950, which is for the most part empty. Well, I take that back. It almost looks like the remaining bullet points that are on this slide. Then I created a protocol mapping section, which is new and different, but it has two subsections, which are not, we don't go into detail in this presentation, but one subsection, I think it's called basic conformance, which essentially says that any server claiming to implement Yang 2.0 must support the operational data store. If there's configuration nodes, then it must support the running data store. If there's any RPC or actions, then I'm sorry, RPC nodes, then it has to support the operational data store as well, and then I think notifications. Anyway, that's all it says in the basic conformance. And then there's a placeholder section called specific conformance, or you know, Yang 2.0 specific conformance, and that section is intended to be filled in later on, and it's going to be highly contentious, but things that I would expect or hope to go into that might be that the server must implement NMDA, the server must implement SymVer, things at that level, right? Where we're basically saying you are not conforming to Yang 2.0 unless your server does these things. But it's not in this document currently yet, but it's kind of a placeholder section for those things to come. And 4, it emphasizes namespaces over XML namespaces. So 7950 had XML namespaces everywhere. It just converted that to namespaces, so it's generic and easily accommodates JSON namespaces as well as XML namespaces. Removed the announcing conformance information in netconf sections. Removed most of the XML encoding rules discussed in the previous presentation. Removed all of the netconf edit config operations sections, removed some of the usage example sections, removed the netconf and the netconf constraint enforcement model. So now it's just simply called constraint enforcement model because it's not really a netconf specific, it was just how are constraints enforced. Removed netconf in the section called netconf edit config processing. So now it's just edit config processing. In fact, I think it's actually called configuration processing because edit config itself is a netconf command, right, or operation. 11, it added 1.1 to the coexistence section. So it does say that 2.0 can coexist with 1.1 and 1. I don't know if that's actually possible, but that's what it says. 12, in section 4.2, the language overview. For each XML encoding example, there's now a matching JSON encoding example. So I mean, there has to be some examples, but I didn't want them to all be XML because we're trying to not make this document not be XML or seemingly XML specific. So I felt that having a complementary JSON example for each XML example was best. An option would have been to interleave them, so every other example is an XML or a JSON example. I think Carsten asked, why aren't there any CBOR examples? It could get out of hand. If we had to pick one, I'd pick JSON, but anyway, that's what currently is in the baseline document. And then for each of the netconf example XML, netconf XML examples, there's now a matching JSON example. So, how do you execute an RPC? Well, here's how you do it in netconf, and well, here's how you do it in JSON or RESTconf using JSON. So that's what that's all there. The hyperlink at the bottom left gives you the diffs. Easy to see, easy to compare diffs. Again, this is in a baseline branch waiting to be merged. The baseline version of the document is held, the hyperlink is there. What would allow it to be merged? So as there's a process I've chosen as editor, we can debate whether or not this is the right process. But essentially, I'm hoping that there's, using GitHub approval, there's some number of approvals that need to occur. I think this depends on how large of a team of approvers are. I have sort of a dream team in mind that would be like, say, 5 or 6 folks, and if like 1/3 of them, so 2 approvals would be good. But I sent an email to the and got no response, and so now I'm thinking, oh well, how about all Yang doctors? There's roughly 18 Yang doctors, so 1/3 of them would be 6. And so maybe 6 if we choose Yang doctors to be the set of approvers, so 6 approvals. So a good number of approvals, no open change request, all comments have been resolved. And once all that done, then the editor would take it to the list, the NETMOD list, and ask if there's any objections. And if no objections are received, within 2 weeks' time, that branch could be merged. And whether or not that constitutes consensus, this is something that I think Mahesh was questioning with Vilas. We can discuss, but essentially, I do hope this to be a GitHub forward effort that we leverage and lean into using GitHub. Being able to comment on pull requests is just amazing and great. And generally, I hope to do that. So once the baseline branch has been merged, then the goal is to merge that branch before any other branches are created. Immediately, I'd love to create a branch to remove any XML, but I'm not creating that branch yet because I want this branch to be merged first. Once this branch is merged, then lots of branches could be created simultaneously, in parallel. They can be worked on in parallel. For each of those branches, it would expected that they would go through the same PR merging process, subject to the constraints mentioned on the previous slide. So the same group of reviewers, 1/3 of some number of code owners would be necessary to approve the PR before it could be merged, and no outstanding change requests, no outstanding comments, and no objections from the list. So that's it for the presentation. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
One comment, just on a process comment. As an editor, speaking as chair, an editor has a lot of discretion on how they judge working group consensus, and there's nothing wrong with running a off-list process to develop content to bring to the working group and then judge consensus on list. So you mentioned earlier that might be a process problem. I don't see a process problem in that. Now, if the working group doesn't want to work that way, that's a different question. But from a process perspective, it's okay to develop it completely on GitHub and then bring it for gauging consensus to the list. Joe?
Yeah, I was going to say something very similar. For 5706 bis, we don't have such a large committee. We do 2 approvers, we merge, and then we bring it to the list. So I would just say keep the process light on the GitHub side, get it to the list, even if it's a -00 next or whatever, then just get the people to talk about it. Don't wait for all this pre-approval.
Hi, Scott Mansfield. I'm a big fan of using GitHub to develop and track issues. I think it is a way that does help bring people together that are working on these. Of course, now there's a but coming. There are people that do not like it. So I don't know that there's so many of those for this type of draft, but I have heard in other groups this week about people complaining about the use of GitHub and it not being inclusive of people to help them comment. So my question is really, what is the mechanism that you're using when you say you want to use GitHub? Are you using Martin Thompson's Markdown? Are you just doing XML? Are you generating, when you do a pull request, are you generating the text of the document so you could point somebody at it so they don't have to know GitHub in order to use it? Do they need a GitHub ID? These are the types of things that, just to make sure that I can tell people when they ask me how best to contribute.
Okay, quick response is no GitHub ID is necessary. It's a public document. It is XML because it's from the RFC editor, and that's what 7950 was. To make it more inclusive, when the branch is created, I could also put a message to the list saying, hey, a branch has been created to talk about this. If you're interested, follow along. So there's a few things that we can do to be more inclusive.
I have also a big fan of GitHub, but with the current process on working group, I think we need to keep GitHub very informal. I like GitHub because you can track issues, you can track pull requests, you can really do something, but as long as the consensus is on the list, we need to publish a document. My suggestion to you is to make it lightweight. For example, what I've discovered, some issue is that you create a pull request, you ask people to review and you don't get a review, but you have to publish tomorrow because it's the cutoff deadline. So what I usually do is, okay, I publish, I merge the pull request, I publish the document on the list. People can always make comments, can create issue against the document anyhow. So my suggestion is not to be too strict on the rule of merging. And I don't have any rule on my GitHub. I didn't see anybody doing a nasty thing like merging a pull request without asking review. And sometimes also the comments, people make a comment on the pull request. It's a big comment. It's not easy to resolve. There is GitHub makes, you can create an issue out of that comment and still merge the pull request and keep track of the issue. So I think you put a very strict rule. You can be more liberal if you help to help people. And last comment about Scott, I like also Markdown. There is a way to translate from XML to Markdown. Maybe you can think for the next, I can help you if you wish. to go to.
Yeah, just one more comment. There's a GitHub IO page for and
Yes.
it renders both text and
Exactly.
the HTML, not just the documents themselves, but also the diffs of the documents.
Yes, exactly.
to
That's
the
why I love
training.
Martin Thompson. Is very great.
Yeah.
And if you
Hey,
have young
we're just so you know, we're over time, but I do want to get the polls in. So I'm going to run. I'm going to run a couple of polls. Italo, you can keep standing at the mic. I'm not trying to stop you. You have time.
It's okay. It's okay. I think I'm done. I was just getting feedback. But my answer is yes.
It helps to unmute the mic. Sorry. So the first one, it's clear there's interest. So I'm going to phrase this question a little differently than before. And specifically, is it time to adopt? There we go. Is it time to adopt any document on this topic? Of course, we only have one submission, so it's not a beauty contest or anything. But is it time? So I saw strong support on both of these. So thank you all. Also, thank you for a good session. Yeah, we always think we're going to have time, and we always manage to fill it. But I think we've filled it with some really good discussions. So appreciate the participation of everyone in the room, online. I appreciate MeetEcho having a pretty much glitch-free session. And Kent and James, thanks for being there in person. I look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting in Vienna. Kent, anything you want to say to close us out?
Nope, all good. Thank you, everybody.